So first, I would like you to meet Suhag Shukla. She is the co-founder of the Hindu American Foundation and serves as its legal counsel and managing director, where she works to build strategic inter- and intra-faith relations and provides analysis on key issues, including the separation of church and state, equal protection, religious discrimination, and immigration reform. Ms. Shukla is actively involved with Chinmaya Mission and serves on the board of Nirvana Center, an organization aiding in the resettlement of Bhutanese refugees in the Twin Cities. And next to her is Professor Christopher Key Chappell. Professor Chappell is Professor of Indic and Comparative Theology at Loyola Marymount University. And next to him, we have Leigh Blaschke. And Leigh is the Director of the Australian Institute of Yoga and a member of the Advisory Council of the International Association of Yoga Therapists. As a founding member of the Yoga Teachers Association of Australia, Leigh has taken a leading role in establishing a unified set of standards and code of practice for yoga teachers in Australia. And next to Leigh is Satguru Bodhinath Velanswamy. And he is the designated successor to Shivaya Subramuni Swami, who was co-president of Hinduism at the 1993 Parliament. Bodhinath is the 163rd preceptor of the Nandinath Sampradaya Kalilas Parampara in the Shaivite Hindu tradition. He is the publisher of the international quarterly journal Hinduism Today, which comes out of Kauai's Hindu monastery in Hawaii. And on the end, we have joining us today Dr. Amir Farid Ishaq. Dr. Amir is a medical consultant and popular health writer with nearly 30 years of practice, who is active in Islamic and interfaith NGOs. So in a moment, we'll begin to hear from our distinguished panelists. I want to first offer you some words about our theme. The science and practice of yoga, as we know, has grown enormously popular all over the world in the last few decades. Its physical and mental health benefits are well recognized. Hinduism teaches that yoga, which literally means union of body and mind in a quest to unite the soul with God, is comprised of 8 steps, or Ashtanga yoga, of which the popularly practiced Hatha yoga postures are an integral part. Although yoga's roots are Hindu, coming from the Vedas, its practitioners come from practically all faiths. In the United States alone, there are about 20 million practitioners, with hundreds of millions worldwide. However, the Hindu roots of yoga and the use of Hindu chants, such as the sacred syllable Om, appear to have created apprehensions in the minds of some leaders as well as lay people of other faiths that the practice of yoga leads to de facto conversion to Hinduism. So this is the interesting question that we will be looking at today, because this question has even led to a ban against yoga practices among people of certain religious traditions and educational institutions. So we begin with this question as to whether or not yoga is truly a universal practice that can be practiced by people from all religions or none without compromising their beliefs. We will hear from Dr. Amir Farid Ishaq now.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. And may I begin my presentation by invoking the most merciful and compassionate God's name, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, you saw what happened to some Muslims, especially in Malaysia, and I come from Malaysia. But I'm not your typical Muslim. So if you want to hear me fighting against yoga, you're going to be disappointed. Because I'm a Sufi and a Sufi master at that. I'm an initiate in Kundalini yoga. I'm a Reiki and Qigong master. Yes, I do come from Malaysia, where yoga was banned last year for Muslims. But I need to explain to you my understanding of this issue. That for a Muslim, we have been advised by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to seek knowledge to as far as China, if we have to. And he was speaking when he was in Mecca, and India was only halfway to China. So that means we have to go to India too. And he didn't say, go to China to teach the Chinese. He said, go and seek knowledge, which means seek knowledge in India and anywhere along the way too. And what kind of knowledge? Any beneficial knowledge should be learned and put to good use by the Muslim. But we are cautioned from practicing anything that can corrupt our faith. And I think that is fair advice. And as you can see, the criticism against yoga for Muslims is that it will destroy our faith. So I will have to give my understanding so that Muslims will at least appreciate why another Muslim do not share their same views. Of course, the fact that I'm a Sufi gives me a biased understanding of everything. The yoga philosophy is very close to the Sufi philosophy, so much so that some Hindus will say that Sufism is just a corruption of Hinduism. And we get bashed from both sides. The non-Sufi Muslims will say that Sufis are just deviant Muslims, you better call yourself Hindus. But because God did not leave humanity unguided before Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, even as Muslims, we are told that every race, every nation, every community, they were given guidance, they were given messages, and they were given prophets and messengers. So the messages and the guidance were there. So when Prophet Muhammad came just 1,500 years ago, when the Hindu tradition and the Hindu philosophy and the Hindu religion were there many, many thousand years before, if I find so many similarities, you can quite understand why. It is not necessarily that I'm just taking yours and corrupting, because you were there thousands of years before me, and whatever is good will be good 10,000 years before, today, and 10,000 years down the line. Can you agree with me with that? Yes. So the philosophy of coming close to God, you may use unity with God, but it's a very sensitive word in Islam because there's always a separation between the Creator and creation and His creation. So for us, I'd rather use the word proximity. So in terms of between me and God, it is proximity. But in terms of using the word unity of my mind, body, and soul within me, no qualms about that. So it is two ways. Within me, it is unity of everything of what I am. Within me and my Creator, it is proximity. That is the yoga philosophy to me, which is equals the Sufi philosophy also. So I tell my friends, you practice yoga, just don't call it yoga. Otherwise you go to jail. Yeah, because the philosophy is what I'm practicing. I want to be close to God and I want to be a complete holistic person. That is yoga, in my understanding. But I must clarify that I cannot speak on behalf of other Muslims, and certainly not the majority of Muslims in Malaysia. So, I've explained to you that Sufism is very close to Hindu spirituality, it's very close to Christian spirituality and any spirituality of any paths. Religions tend to divide us. Spirituality unites us. So if you're religious but not spiritual, you may have problems living in this world. But if you're religious and spiritual, then life is a breeze. Being a practitioner and a master of Qigong and Reiki, I am aware about the human energy system, and that we talk about prana, we talk about chakra, and as a medical doctor, I even get rubbish by medical colleagues. But it is not always necessary for you to prove something to others who, no matter how much proof and experience you share with them, will continue to reject. So, as long as it is beneficial for you and you are convinced, you can continue your practice. You may not be aware that even in the Sufi practice, we talk about energy. The Sufi refers to the prana, the chi as latifa. All right? But very few Sufis even go on the energy system of the body. But that's not our issue. Our main issue here is whether yoga corrupts the Islamic faith. So in my humble opinion, it does not, provided I am careful, especially when it involves the mantras. I try as far as possible to avoid the mantras. But even the mantras are not wrong if you know the meaning. What's wrong about mentioning and reciting God's names or God's attributes or any other thing that's good in other languages? Right? If I say, I love God in Arabic, in Malay, in English, in Sanskrit, what's wrong is that? But I must be sure of the meaning of the mantra, because one very, very important practice that Muslims have to avoid is anything that even comes close to ascribing partners to God. You know what's so crucial for Muslims is the absolute oneness of God, our strict monotheism, our tawheed. So we don't want to be in danger of corrupting our faith just because we don't know what we are chanting. All right? So unless I know the meaning of the mantras, I will try to avoid. But if I know, and the meaning is good, and in line with my aspiration to be close to God, why not? All right? We can glorify God in as many languages as possible, and the more we do it, the more glorified God will be. If you can chant mantras in Arabic, in Sanskrit, in Malay, in English, why not? All right? But just be sure what you're chanting. All right? If you believe God in one, don't go chanting around that God is three. All right? Because you don't know. And I see number one there. As a reminder for me that I have only 1 minute. So I hope in this initial part that you are clear that even though I'm a Muslim, coming from a background of a Sufi, and an initiate in Kundalini Yoga, why I do not have any qualms, right, in practicing yoga, but I make it very clear that I know what I'm doing, all right? I try to avoid any areas where there might be some problems, and certainly those areas that would really infringe on my religion. Assalamu alaikum.
We'll hear now from Lay Blashki.
Thank you, and good morning, one and all. I think it behoves upon me as the only local Australian and Melburnian member of the panel, to bid you all a welcome, and particularly a welcome to the fellow esteemed panel members. Unfortunately, I don't have a eucalyptus leaf to offer you all, which would be the traditional welcome. But I can simply say namaste, which is a welcome that I know, swagatam, which is a welcome I know, shalom, which is a welcome I know, and salam alaikum, which is a welcome I know. I'm not going to buy into trying to give advice or opinions as to whether yoga has the potential to convert your thinking or corrupt your thinking from what at any particular moment is your religious bent. Rather, I'd like to ask you to consider some questions which will help you to find out for yourself where you think yoga fits within the spectrum of religious contexts. And in that perhaps is a guidance as to what the some of the foundations of Hindu thinking is, which is self-reflection, svadhyaya, what the foundation of yoga is, which apart from the unification of mind, body, spirit, oneness or closeness to God, it is about self-inquiry. And one of the reasons I think it is so important to welcome people when people come together in a gathering, in a sangha, is because we are recognizing the divinity within each other. Is that not yoga? When I train yoga teachers, and I've been doing it for 12 years here in Melbourne, and I guess the other people who train yoga teachers throughout the world, in the West particularly, wrestle with this idea as to how much we give in to the want of aspiring Western-based yoga teachers to learn so much about the physical aspects of yoga. And we wrestle with how do we, in fact, keep the yoga, we often use the word the true yoga, within the practice of yoga. How do we keep the tradition, the roots, the worldview of the Samkhya philosophy, the yoga philosophies? And we don't try and impose these things, we try and model them. I believe that yoga in this modern world does not have to convince other people of its merits or its strengths, or to defend itself from accusations that it is proselytizing, it's evangelical. It simply is, it simply exists, and that the concept of yoga, of union in one form or other, exists in just about every religion. I was born into an Orthodox Jewish family, and perhaps in some ways similar to the popular local TV personality John Safran that some people may be familiar with, a couple of people are nodding, some not, who has wrestled with this idea of what does my faith mean to me. I have found that until taking on board the precepts of yoga, this idea of unification of the otherwise disparate parts of myself, body, mind, emotions and spirit, that the religion was somewhat a little dry. Now, maybe that's just my own particular experience with Orthodox Judaism, but in discussing with numerous people over the years, because I tend to make the study of philosophy of life itself in general, with the yoga as a foundation, one of my sort of personal pursuits, and I discussed with the thousands of people over the last few years who have a strong religious background, and so many believe that they're just not quite sure what their religion means to them. There's a sense of seeking because their religions have told them, accept this is the way that it is. Yoga, as with my understanding and my limited exposure to traditional Hinduism, is one where we are taught to inquire, to go within, to experience the nature of our being. And when we experience that nature, nobody externally can say to us, that is wrong, because we develop our own wisdom. And so yoga is a sense of a personal wisdom that comes from feeling comfortable with an amount of self-knowledge, whatever that happens to be, and wherever you happen to be in your own journey at that particular time. I'm going to say a few words to you now, which some on the panel and some in the audience will recognise immediately as to what they are, and I'm going to ask you a question afterwards. I honour the place in you where the entire universe resides, a place of peace and truth and of love and light, where when you are in that place in you and I am in that place in me, we are in the same place. Now, some people will recognise those words. Are they words that could apply to any and every religion? There are quite a few people nodding. People aren't quite sure. I'm not suggesting they are. I'm not imposing that upon you. But consider those words. I'm going to say them again. I think they're very important. I honour the place in you where the entire universe resides, a place of peace and truth, of love and light, where when you are in that place in you and I am in that place in me, we are in the same place.
As we've heard it sometimes said, instead of we are in the same place, we are one.
Or we are one, that's right. So Swami here is referring to what is often the translation of the word namaste. Every religion has its namaste. The person involved in participating in the religion, and I use that word advisedly, participate, not just blindly follow, ought to find what the other equivalent of namaste is within their own religion. And I am of no doubt that they will find the similarity to those words. And it's interesting that the word yoga, from yuj, to join, to yoke together, maybe it's not just about the joining of our own individual mind, body, spirit, emotions, coming to our own sense of samadhi, our own ecstasy, or our own elevation and absorption within the understanding of our true nature. Maybe that yuj, that yoking that yoga tries to bring, is the joining in an interfaith way between people who otherwise might see themselves as separate, to break down the barriers, to dissolve the barriers. So I would put to you and encourage you to consider that yoga, not only does it not challenge other religions, the concept of yoga, the exact meaning of the word, offers a way for religions to see, feel and experience similarities and to come to that place is exemplified by the word namaste. Thank you.
We'll hear now from Satguru Bodhinath Velan Swami.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. Good morning.
The term yoga refers to a wide variety of Hindu practices. Therefore, it is always helpful when discussing yoga to modify the word with a second term to clarify what particular kind of yoga is being discussed. The yoga that is the subject of this panel is commonly referred to as Ashtanga yoga. Ashta means 8 and Anga means limbs. The idea is that this system of yoga is comprised of 8 progressive practices. Sage Patanjali is credited with being the first person to present the ancient tradition of yoga in a systematic way. He did this in the Yoga Sutras, which are thought to be as old as 200 before Common Era. For simplicity in the rest of the talk, when we use the word yoga, it will always refer to Ashtanga yoga. But I'd like to share an insightful comment on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras from Vamadeva Shastri. Yoga today is most known for its asana, yogic posture tradition, the most popular, visible, and outward form of the system. Buddhism, by comparison, is known as the tradition of meditation, as in the more popular forms of Buddhist meditation, like Zen and Vipassana. Many people who have studied yoga in the West look to Buddhist teachings for meditation practices, not realizing that there are yogic and Vedantic forms of meditation which are traditionally not only part of the yoga system, but its core teaching.